This episode is brought to you by the Pelora Group.
Welcome back to Winning Through Culture.
I'm Tim Flanagan.
And I'm Amanda Kramer.
When culture's not a priority, people aren't a priority. Having an intentional focus helps you as a leader remain impactful and relevant as you move your business forward.
Welcome to Winning Through Culture.
Welcome back to another episode of Winning Through Culture. Amanda and I are really excited to be with you today. We have a very special guest, Kelsey O'Connor. Kelsey, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, we're excited to have you. So our conversation today is about living beyond labels, either those that others place on us or that we place on ourselves, which sometimes can happen. And this is a part of our series really on mental well-being. Our last guest on this topic, Dr. Goodson, had some really interesting things to say. And I know our conversation with you today is going to be really rich. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk about it. Thank you so much.
That's awesome. Well, just to give a little more context about Kelsey for those that are listening along with us, she is a former Division I athlete who actually had a graduation speech that went viral, and it is very viral worthy. If you haven't had an opportunity, we'll definitely put the link in the show notes so you can check it out. But she's going to be sharing about how you are able to live beyond labels. So she works as a motivational speaker, a mental performance coach. She also has her own podcast, which we'll definitely link everybody to as well. But she really helps others through her own story, help embrace resilience and living beyond the labels that, as Tim said, either you put on yourself or people put on you. And I know sitting in a leadership position, whether it's on a sports team or in an entrepreneurial environment, we all have labels that we carry. And sometimes it's really good to put that armor down, as I like to say. And I can't wait to hear more about your story. And I know our listeners will enjoy it. So let's hop into really what that looks like. So I'm going to start with the viral speech because it really was powerful, emotional too, especially those if you're close to coming out of school or you have the opportunity to be involved with somebody who's making that transition from school into whether it's the workforce or figuring out what their next step is going to be. Life really changed quickly for you when you were an athlete. You had an incident, is what I like to call it. You had an incident that really left you.
I like that.
Yeah, that left you in a place that you had to decide who you wanted to be in that moment. So can you take us back to really what launched your opportunity to lean into how you work with people now and helping people live beyond labels?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the kind introduction. I guess absolutely we'll start kind of in that moment that really did pivot for me and send me down this path that I'm so grateful for, but was really difficult in the moment. So I was heading into my junior year of college. It was the fall of my junior year. So it was really an exciting time. Softball wise, just kind of a bigger year post-COVID, like things were really settling down. And it was just I was looking forward to this season. And ultimately at practice, I had a really bad collision while I was base running. And so I ended up suffering a pretty severe head injury. And unfortunately, I'd had multiple head injuries prior. And so when I collided with our shortstop during practice. I was base running to second base. She was coming through to turn a double play. And instead of making a lane, her knee collided straight with my face. And it was really in that moment that I think I immediately kind of knew that life was going to shift. But I didn't realize how severe it would be kind of following that. So I end up having this head injury. And then for the next several weeks, I start to experience symptoms that even having dealt with concussions before, I had never experienced. So cognitive symptoms, I developed a late onset stutter. I was struggling to communicate my words. I was having personality changes and just all of these things that all of a sudden I was dealing with. And then an additional identity change of having put a lot of stake into being a good student and knowing I wanted to be a social worker and knowing that that was my long-term path. But then also these cognitive issues really were impacting that as well. So I wasn't able to do like my schoolwork very well. I was struggling to read and write. I thought I was going to fail out. And so all of these things that I'd really placed my value and worth in and identity in were rocky, and I just couldn't rely on them anymore. And the identity shift really came when I had to sit with myself and make a choice of I have no clue if I'm going to recover, when I'm going to recover, what is my life going to look like? I'm freshly 20 years old and I don't know now if I could even be a social worker, if I'm going to finish school. I know that I'm not playing softball, but all of these other things that I had relied on as well. And then it kind of came to this choice where I thought, if I'm going to take it day by day, how can I heal the way that I see myself? And so I ultimately, on the notes app on my phone, made this resolution that I was going to start seeing myself beyond labels by seeing the people around me beyond labels. And it really just started as a simple, I put it on the notes app on my phone and I tried to change the way that I was conversing and even just talking about others in my daily life. So introducing my cousins, I would tell you about their personality and how kind they were and fun they were before I would tell you about their jobs. And anybody that I was talking about, not in a room, I was trying to really just describe them for their hearts and their energy. And over the next 10 months after that injury, I ended up recovering really well. And I had this great last year of school. And I decided to apply to speak at our NC State commencement ceremony at the end of that senior year, just really feeling like I wanted to end my college career differently. I also just wanted to celebrate the people around me. I felt like I had really developed this identity change of describing myself and celebrating myself for more. And I saw so many people around me that I was going to school with that were just very resilient and hardworking and wanted to celebrate that as well. And so on a whim, I decided to apply to give the speech. I recorded the video in a t-shirt on the floor of my living room. I mean, truly sporadic.
That's awesome.
And sent it in. Yes. Oh my gosh. If I were to pull it up, you'd be like, that is crazy. It's blurry. I mean, it was just on a whim. I took the video and applied and they ended up choosing me. And of course, it went really, really well and ultimately went viral on the internet and led to just the most amazing opportunities. I started getting messages on Facebook and Instagram inviting me to speak at conferences and universities and businesses. And all of a sudden, I was moved into this opportunity to help people through this story. And it just changed in a way I never would have thought. So it was really just this moment of deciding something on my phone leading to like an internal shift. And then now it's something that I get to do externally for other people. And it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's really a neat story, Kelsey, because, life gives us adversity like that. And to your point, you had a trajectory and a plan, and then something happened that changed the direction of that. You spoke to this a little bit, but I'm curious, kind of in the middle of it all, kind of in the darker days, what was keeping you going? What was keeping you moving forward?
Yeah, I would say number one would have been my support system. I think I'm very lucky that I had a support system. But I think what kept me going is I really tried to picture like what a healthy, happy version of myself looked like when that was just so far away. And my faith in being able to get there and just faith in general, like really, truly taking it one day at a time is such a cliche thing to say, but it's very true. Like I had to really sit and go, what is in my control right now today to just get to tomorrow? And I would just really picture myself and believe that I could get to this other side of healing, even if I didn't know if that was possible. And that really kept me going, just having that faith and having that belief and then really trying to work towards it and make minimal progress.
I appreciate
So I think just having that faith. Yeah.
Well, we talk about faith on this podcast a lot and off this podcast. So we certainly can appreciate the power of how that sustains you in the moment, because that's all we have ultimately is that moment, this moment.
What I think to your point, Tim, and I know you say like it's a cliche to say like take it one day at a time. And to Tim's point, I think you have to take it like moment by moment, because when you're in that space, no matter if you're dealing with a mental illness or an injury, or there's just some state of like, am I going to be able to do this? Literally, it can change like this. Just like your incident happened, just like this, and you weren't expecting it. You have the opportunity to choose how you place yourself in that moment. And I think that that's really important from a leadership standpoint, because we're given those moments as gifts and they ultimately add up to a lifetime of a career and a legacy and all those things. But you really do have to understand that every single moment that you're gifted really is to be treasured. And ultimately you have your choice of how you're going to show up for yourself and for those that are around you. And you said it really beautifully that when people would ask you about your community or your support system, you would express who they are for their energy and their heart first before like what they do for a living or the label that they might have or their title that they might have at work. And that is, I think, really important. It kind of reminds me, which I know this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I happened to be, at like a summer barbecue and I was in the pool and like floating around with a friend, and I had somebody else come up and This person was in our industry, which was great. And they did not even lean into anything other than, so what do you do? And it wasn't, what do you do like in life? It wasn't, what do you enjoy? It wasn't anything like that. It was like, what
Yeah.
is your title and what do you do every day to be productive? And I just sat with it for a moment, right? A moment is a gift. I sat with that for a moment and I was like, well, my label is so much more. Like, I need to shed
Yeah.
that because my title is just my title. Like, it doesn't matter what that is. It doesn't say what I do every day or who I am as a person. So I am going to start shifting and answering that question differently now that you said that, talking about your energy and your heart. That's a really cool way to put that. So
Thank you. I actually love that you share that because I think too, I often get the question of like in social, like at parties and social situations, how do you change that? Because small talk is just very natural. Like it's really hard to go against the grain of like, what do you do and where are you from? And I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it was really cool. My friends and I did an event. We hosted an event that was like a strangers to friends type event. And she invited me because the goal of the event was for these women. It was like 20 women, and we weren't allowed, quote unquote, to talk about our jobs. And it was really awkward at
that.
first because I'm always the where are you from, and then kind of getting into conversation. But it was so interesting because the beginning was a little weird. We were all struggling to kind of ask regular questions that didn't have to do with work. But then the immediate kind of jump once we started getting into just we had them all like, would you describe yourself by your attitude, how you treat others, and what makes you unique? And there's like a long silent pause because nobody can answer it at first. And then it led to like the richest, deepest conversation. And by the end of the event, it was about a 3-hour event. It was this indoor luxury picnic. We were all exchanging numbers. I've made amazing friends from there. They've all connected with each other. And so how quickly we were able to jump into a little bit deeper of who people were and their energy and make these friends away from some of the job. It was just such a unique experience. And so I think it's just interesting that you bring up because that's such a common scenario of how do you maybe go past the label. And I do think it's describing other people maybe in your life or kind of asking a question that's a little bit deeper, even if it feels awkward, just to kind of get past some of that or just get to know somebody and be curious about who they are past that.
Well, and something to kind of tie it through, which is an interesting thread because we've had Ross Kimball on our podcast, and he, of course, is really big into improv and how you have these conversations and the whole thought process about being in that social interaction or professional interaction. He uses the concept of yes and. So yes, I am 1, 2, and 3, but I also am da 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 da. And here's how that helps me show up in the world, and here's the impact that I have, which I just think is really cool. So you can be one thing, 2 things can be true, right? Or 3 things or 4 things. But yes, and here, let me answer that a little bit differently, which I think is a unique way to show up in the world, which is just really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kelsey, I want to capture those 3 things you said because I thought that was brilliant. So instead of getting together and talking about job titles and labels, kind of putting people in boxes, it was their attitude. How would they describe their attitude, I guess, in life, how they treat others, and then what makes them unique? These are the 3 questions. So I am curious, what were some of the things that you learned in that particular moment that kind of surprised you that you might not have learned if those 3 things hadn't been on the table?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that stood out to me was people really struggled to come up with what made them unique. It was a really interesting flow because people would start with saying, I like to think that but they all had different answers, which I also was shocked by because if we look at attitude, usually we describe it in positive or negative or like joyful. And people would talk about how they have an open mind and they like to move through the world with positivity. Or some people would say, I think I have an attitude of optimism, but I also try to be a critical thinker. And they were just kind of getting into more descriptions, which shied away from attitude. But the more that they started, like it started off with, I have a positive attitude. And then it would lead into, and I think I applied that to the people in my life because I give a lot of grace and forgiveness. And it was like, I treat others well, which I think leads into the fact that I like to think I'm a very loving person. And what makes me unique is my heart and my compassion. Or another girl was completely different. She was, my attitude is very larger than life. I think I kind of fill a room with my energy. And sometimes I'm not so sure about how to feel about it, but I do think it's something to celebrate. And I try to welcome others into a room because I know that I have the social energy to do it. And so we had individuals that were on the quieter side or the more extroverted side. And the moment that they kind of allowed themselves to talk about themselves in this positive way, the more they started sharing and the deeper it got into like how they function in their relationships and the way that they see other people and themselves and what they're going towards. Even just going towards, I'm trying to be a more grounded person. I feel like I rush through the moment too much and I really want to stay present, but I feel like I do this for the people in my life. And so it ultimately just naturally led into just some deeper things about how people were going for their future or what they felt about themselves. And so the biggest thing that stood out was just how difficult it was in the beginning. No one wanted to go first. No one wanted to share what made them unique. They felt so awkward about it to talk about themselves in that way. But when it was deliberate and everybody had to do it and we had to run through those things, it was really special to see people light up the more that they were just able to talk about it. And it was a very safe room to do that and celebrate each other. It was very interesting. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think so many people have a canned, air quotes, canned response to what those normal social questions are of, well, what do you do for work? What does your family composition look like? Whatever that is. I know that if you put me in a room and you were like, what makes you unique? I would have to think about that for a minute, right? Like there are a lot of, and Tim's smiling over there. There's a lot of things that I know about me that would be like, oh yeah, somebody would think that that was unique, but I don't know that I would put that as unique, right? Because it's just how I feel like I show up in the world, which I feel is normal. So I don't think that it makes me special. So I think that that's a really unique question, something that maybe every leader should maybe think about ahead of time and have that thought process to be able to enter into that discussion with someone. Because I think that's a cool way to have a dialogue with someone that you're in community with, whether that's personally or professionally. I'm going to have to work on my answer.
I love it.
Usually the people closest to you that can tell you what what makes you unique more than you can tell.
Tell yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very true. And that's such a good point because I feel like I couldn't have answered that question either. Nor did I want to when I was kind of going through. Yeah. I mean, even still, I think about how I'm encouraging others to do this, but I still struggle with it myself or like it feels weird. But I definitely think like having people to reflect back to you or even kind of asking for feedback sometimes or working on, I noticed in myself, like I wanted to work on describing other people first because it came so much easier. And that is really how I started to see myself differently beyond those labels was because I couldn't do it for myself. I didn't have a lot of self-compassion at the time. I did feel like I had failed softball, failed school. Like I was just couldn't really find it within myself to be like, what makes me unique and how do I have a good attitude? And I thought in this choice, I'm going to choose to do it about other people because I care about that. And that's much easier to me. And the more I started to do that for other people, then I felt like it was being reflected back to me. And that wasn't the like initial attention, but that's just kind of how it ended up going. And so I think you just make a really good point about it's easier to see in other people. And I would even say that the more that you seek it out in other people and seek to describe them that way or look for those things, the more you end up seeing it in yourself.
It's very true. So you shifted, right? So I'm going to use the label, you went from being an athlete to this very pivotal moment in your life where you chose to stand up and fight for yourself in a different way. And then you moved into stepping into speaking and being motivational in that way and stepping into coaching and all those different elements. What did that shift look like for you to lean into that your path would be different versus what you thought it might have been prior to your injury?
On the athletic side, I think I just had to lean into the fact that I got to choose how I was going to see it. As hard as that is, it just wasn't productive for me to ruminate over what could have been or how I could have done better or what I could have done to change the outcome. And so I think once I just hit that point of making a decision, and I also didn't really want sympathy. I didn't want to be known for the things that I had gone through. And so for myself in that athletic space, I always knew that softball was going to have an end date. I was stuck a little bit because it didn't end the way that I thought. And so for that realm of my life, I really just leaned into how am I going to embrace this change with confidence? and look back at my career and decide I'm going to pull all of those intangible qualities that I gained and developed, and even the ones that I'm experiencing right now of resilience and strength of it didn't work out the way I wanted. What a great example to set. So many people in life have things that don't end the way that we planned or they go through hardship. And so what if I just set a great example for myself, even of just moving forward with it and accepting it and accepting that that's going to change and that's okay and move forward as best as I can with good confidence. So in the athletic realm of my life, that was how I dealt with it. And then the jump, I think, from the injury of my career path, I think I was very lucky to ultimately heal well and finish school because there was that moment of, I don't even know as a professional anymore where I'm going to go. But really going from athlete to social work / mental performance and speaking and all these other things, it was really a great transition, honestly. I think I just wanted to make meaning out of everything that I'd been through before and also what I had gained from that experience. And so transitioning into this new professional role in all of these different realms, I actually just feel so much more fulfilled. And it was more of a natural transition than I anticipated when I decided to let go of feeling like it was a failure. It wasn't how it should have been. And there are still days where I struggle with just mentally. I have brain fog a little bit here and there. And so in a human profession, when you're talking to somebody, that's obviously not fantastic. Or when I'm on a stage for 60 minutes and I blank out in the middle, like I really have to recover quickly. And so there's times where I struggle a little bit. I wish that my biggest stressor was on a field playing a game like it used to be. But at the same time, just embracing it and trying to make meaning out of what was and apply it into what is now made the transition easier.
A curious question, Kelsey. So you obviously needed to stop playing softball because I've had a few concussions. So you get to a point where you really got to put yourself in a spot where you don't have another one. Are there things, I'm very curious, I mean, you were an athlete as a softball player. Are there things you've done to satiate the athlete in you that are not softball related?
Yes, it took a while. Recently, I would say I started really trying a few different things. I tried yoga and I tried working out. And I recently started going to a gym that's like a small boutique community fitness type gym. So they do HIIT and strength and balance things. So it's like a nice realm. And I love that aspect of it. Like the community fitness, it's smaller group classes. It's like a personal training experience in a group setting. So I love being told what to do. So it really does emulate my college athletic experience as much as possible with the harder workouts and the community. And that's something I've really fallen in love with. I just started picking up tennis and golf, which are kind of lower impact sports, not as much risk of collision and things like that. So that's been really fun and interesting. And so I would say even just recently, I've finally kind of found those outlets to emulate that. But that's a great question.
Wow. I just figured that's once an athlete, always an athlete. It's just a matter of how I had a catastrophic skiing accident. So I can appreciate when things they tell you, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. And it's like, well, there's still some things you can do. So I am curious though, through the whole experience, making this transition of letting go of being a softball player, to your point, and the way you envisioned it, you knew it would end. What was maybe the biggest thing you learned about yourself, letting go of that part of your identity?
I think the biggest thing that I learned about myself was probably the strength and resilience that I was going to be able to apply to any area of my life. I think deciding to let go, because there's so much right out of your control in those moments, and then really finding what are my choices within this out of control situation. I no longer have a choice to go back and play. I no longer have a choice to not be experiencing pain every day, but I have a choice of how I'm going to choose to treat people in my life right now, what attitude I'm going to have, very, very simple choices. And so I think learning that I always had some set of choices within anything that was spiraling in my life, I then felt just so prepared and equipped to face other things and to face other challenges. And so really learning that I had that within myself was very meaningful and also just very helpful to apply to whatever life brings next, if that makes sense, if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, that's, to your point, that's a life skill that can be applied in so many different settings.
Well, and I think the other part is that you experienced that and you've made a shift, and I hope that there's never another incident like that in your life, but there will be other moments that you get to that are heavy or pivotal. And as you continue to grow as a human and all of those things, we'll just use the identity of human. As you continue to grow, you're going to have some of those moments. And could be somebody listening right now who is kind of in the middle of that, of deciding, okay, I'm in this struggle and how am I going to choose the next moment? Is there any advice or any habit or anything that you did? I know you really focus more around mental clarity and deciding for yourself that you were going to choose X. But did you journal? I know you had a really great support system. Was there anything that you're like, this really helped me in that moment of struggle move from point A to point B mentally, that you would share to someone that's like kind of going through it right now? Like whether it's a injury or just a tough moment, what would that look like?
Absolutely. Yes. So I definitely journaled. I would say I journaled. Even when I was struggling to write in my journal, I also kept a video journal for about 6 years. So, I mean, any form of journaling, I did it practically every day. And I think that was a huge reason that I was able to move forward, because you're just sitting with your thoughts and you're kind of able to get to know yourself. I mean, that's a document of where your mind is at. And even going back to see how you've progressed, that was helpful for me, because even, let's say, 6 weeks into my recovery, time is moving like molasses. I feel like I haven't made any progress. But I look back at my journal from even 2 or 3 weeks ago and I think, okay, I'm doing a little bit better than then. Or even if it kind of pivots down, I think, okay, I've had this pivot before and it's come back up, it's going to be okay. And so journaling, whether it was just bullet journaling my feelings, whether it was making lists of goals for the future. I mean, my journal is where I ended up writing this resolution that I was going to make for my mind. And so journaling is I strongly encourage it for everybody. So that was a big one. I would also say volunteering. I think I was able to kind of shift my energy, not right away, but within a few months of recovery. And when I was still struggling with a lot of the emotional aspect of it, I was volunteering and doing some of my social work internships, et cetera, and stepping outside of myself during an identity change and making it not always about me actually really filled me up, and has always been something that I've been really passionate about. And it's something that I do encourage people that are going through an identity shift to do, even if it's just an hour or two, because I think it just helps put things into perspective and helps remove you and gets you out of your circle and your day to day. And so I would say volunteering and journaling are both things that I did very often that really helped me to ground myself. I would also say for identity, for me, it was prayer. Prayer was really helpful, or just visualizing for some people, like where they want to be. Because again, it is so tough, whether you're retiring from a job or, I mean, what was really special is I've had messages from people that were exiting very long relationships or had a life-changing loss or were retiring or not even sure how they were going to move on. So it didn't even just have to be an athlete, but just all of these other things. And I think even journaling what attributes and qualities you developed during that time of being in that role is really important and special to look back at. So yes, you might have been working in education, let's say, for 20 years or in accounting. Maybe you developed organization and patience and problem solving, and really looking at those qualities underneath that label is very important as well. And then allowing yourself to know that those don't leave you. Just because the title is leaving you and the change is leaving you, and change is scary and it's going to be, look at what you've developed is your character. And how you choose to move forward in this moment is also a testament to your character. What an opportunity for you to either really struggle with it and you should feel it through, but also recognize what you've developed and how you want to move forward with that, because no one can take that away from you. And that's what makes you special.
Well, I think you make a really good point, because at the end of it, we all want to be seen for who we are, not the title that we have in our current position, or, the labels continue personally and professionally, right? So you're a mom, you're a daughter, you're a sister, all the things, right? And at the end of the day, you just want to be seen for who you are at your core. And I think that really speaks back to how leaders and those that are building communities. And we like to say, so of course, Tim and I work together daily. And then this podcast is an extension of the stories that we have. And the good, bad, and the ugly, as I like to say, of the experiences that we've had together. And I think that as far as leadership is concerned, you want to build a culture where people truly feel valued for who they are, not just what they do. And I wonder if you have any, like, not that you have to have this like giant epiphany to share with people, but how do you think leaders or leaders of like in a business setting or even teams in a sports setting really can help further that message along? Like, is there anything that you were like, I was so thankful that X person in my support community did this for me when I was going through that? Like how you felt seen and valued for who you were, not just the fact that you were an athlete at the time or whatever you might have been in that moment.
Absolutely. I think that's a fantastic question because especially in a leadership setting, I think it's about noticing those things. And so as a leader, if you're leading a group of people, noticing the person that has a great attitude or even just showed up despite some of the challenges that they're dealing with, or those little things that we don't always recognize or call out, or maybe we see them, but we don't always speak to them. I think when you have a culture in a leadership setting where you are celebrating those intangible qualities within other people and those little things that really do create the energy of a room, whether that's just attitude towards coworkers or you're shouting out, hey, I love that you stayed after and just made sure the office was clean and that you're always just doing things with integrity. I really appreciate it. Just calling out little things that you notice and kind of opening your eyes to those things. I think I really appreciated my own qualities because that was also called out for me. So I did not achieve what I wanted to achieve at all on the softball field, but I also took a lot of pride in that I had a relationship with every staff member from the field crew to the custodial staff to like that is something that was called out to me by my support system and they, were proud of that. And so I think calling out those things, or I was always the last to leave every single practice, every single first to get there, last to leave, making sure things were clean, making sure things were organized. And I can look back now. Obviously, I have some wishes to what could have been, but the things within my control and those characteristics, I'm glad that people notice them in me because it made me feel seen and appreciated. And I think in just a general setting, wherever we are as a leader, it is kind of a little bit on you to call those things out and to see them and to notice them. Because when you even celebrate them just a little bit, you are creating culture of other people noticing that in one another. And I think that creates a really good ripple effect for a positive atmosphere around you. So I think it's just very small. It doesn't have to be, I think you're amazing all the time, but just noticing the little things that people are doing that speak to their character and then uplifting those is going to generate that amongst the people around you.
Be the change you want to see.
Yes, exactly. Beautiful.
Well, I think for those that are listening along, like if there's any one thing that you want people to take away from your story and being able to live beyond a label that they carry, what would you share as like the one thing you want people to be like, I heard that and maybe I'll do something a little bit differently for those around me to make that a reality?
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I know we've talked, this is a repetitive, but really focusing on your attitude and how you treat others and what qualities you've developed throughout your life and what makes you unique, those can never be taken away from you. Those are always something that you can control. And so whether you are struggling with an identity change right now or just a life transition, or maybe you're in your routine and you feel stuck, it doesn't even matter. Maybe you're in a great place. Those three things are within your control on the day-to-day basis. And if you start to celebrate that within yourself and you celebrate those things within other people and look for them, I do genuinely believe that it will change your outlook and it will make your life more positive and just fulfill you. I do believe that. So that is my advice, would be to just start looking for those things in yourself and other people because you deserve to see yourself for those qualities that you've attained.
Yeah. Well, and I would even take it one step further to say I would challenge anyone who's listening to this podcast to think about how you answer that question when somebody asks you and you're in a social setting. So maybe it is you describe yourself from an attitude standpoint, how you treat others, or really what makes you unique. I'm going to have to work on that answer. But I think that, having that opportunity to think about how you engage with the individuals you're meeting in a different way, if you're reflective on yourself, as you said, to be able to describe those attributes and your character, I think it would create a very lasting impact. So much so that your viral speech, I think, hit like 70 million people across 27 countries. So that one change that you made, that you stepped into that space of uncomfortability, honestly, right? Like it's not something you thought you would do. You sat on the floor in a t-shirt and recorded it, and then it exploded. And I think the lasting impact that you're going to have for those individuals who were able to invest in your story and kind of come alongside you and cheer you on, whether you know them or don't know them, or in industry, not in industry. It's just a really cool message to put into the world. So it's been so lovely having you on. Tim, any other thoughts as we...
Yeah, I just kind of wrap up, Kelsey. I mean, I'm very impressed by your wisdom. You are obviously a young person. We know from the timeline of that. You have great wisdom for someone your age, and very inspiring in that respect. And I think I speak for both Amanda and I, we really honor that you took some, adversity in your life and turned it into a gift you're giving to other people. And that's a pretty special thing, and really are honored that you took some time today to be with us and to be with our listeners and to share your story, to share what you've learned in that story. And I know that those that listen to this podcast are going to take some very great wisdom and value out of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure, and thank you.
Yeah. And then one last thing, what's the best place for those that are listening along to learn more about how your story is unfolding? If they wanted to maybe engage with you, is it Instagram? What is the best way for those to get in contact with you?
Thank you. Yeah. So my social and Instagram is probably the most easy way to get to me, which is Kelsey O'Connor 6. And my website is kelseyo'connor.com. So you can also find everything that I'm doing and reach out to me there. And my podcast, Life Beyond Labels, you can listen to as well on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else you get your podcast.
Well, Kelsey, it was a pleasure. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Winning Through Culture.
Until next time, stay intentional, be impactful.
Because your culture matters.